Good morning. It's the 16th of March. I'm not sleeping very well, and I imagine it's the same for a lot of you folks out there as well. In case you're wondering what's disturbing our sleep, it's because the shields of our planet are down. The magnetosphere has diminished. The magnetic field has lost some of its strength. Actually, it's lost almost all of it. I would have to estimate that we're down to as low as 5% of normal strength of magnetism. And if you think that's not significant, or if it sounds significant, it should, because it's extremely significant. What's happening is that these particles from space are going through us. They're actually going through the planet, right straight through the planet and through us at the same time. I believe these are called neutrinos. I don't stay up in all the fields, and I'm not talking as much about these areas, and areas in which I don't talk much about, I have a little bit of difficulty accessing memory for the words and the terms and all of that. I'm older, yes. Wish I could say I was wiser. The fact is that I'm on information overload, and most of us are on information overload at this point. And it's going to stay this way or get worse from here towards the end. And in case you're wondering what the end is, it's the end of an Earth age. Just to give you an example, we've been through this part in our Milky Way galaxy many times before. And it takes a long time to go around the Milky Way. I don't know how many years it is. It's probably on the order of, I'm just going to take a guess off the top of my head, 12,500 years, maybe 25,000, maybe 125,000 years. But those are the numbers I come up with, and I guesstimate, because those are the years of the calamities, of the recycling of the face of the planet. Now, we're at a point where our solar system is going to be going through a particularly dusty area of the Milky Way. And every time we come to this zone, we end up with several things happen. One is that we gather dust, cosmic radiation, gamma rays, or dust, and the Earth's mass actually increases during these periods. So the Earth actually grows, and evidence of that would be that our years get longer. As the Earth gets larger, the time it takes to revolve around the sun increases a little bit. So we're now slightly over 365 days a year. It was estimated by another psychologist, and I'm not familiar with this gentleman. I'm not familiar with his work as a psychologist. I know that he is a little on the eccentric side, wears kind of a funny hat. Reminds me of a period of the Renaissance or before, and he also participates in giving a lot of conferences. So he's a fine speaker. And one of the things he discussed was the fact that the Earth's mass during this next period is going to increase by 100.05% or 100.5%. So we're going to get a small bump up in mass. Now, of course, that's going to affect the entire planet. And what usually happens during these periods is that we have a continent, a piece of a continent will break off. And any piece of a continent breaking off is cataclysmic for the entire surface of the planet. One of the things this psychologist said is that we've been subject to instant freezes in the past. And the evidence of the instant freezes were the mastodons frozen in ice, with their cuds still in their mouths and in their stomachs. In other words, these animals froze so quickly they didn't even have time to spit out their food. They died with the food in their mouths. It looks like it's an instant freeze, and when it happens, it might take 4 hours, it might take 12 hours. But everything on the surface is frozen, and if you want to escape it, you would have to be down pretty low in the earth. I think about 14 feet underground is where the protective zone is. The problem is you won't have time to dig a hole, and you won't even have time to go into a cave that already exists. When it hits fast, it hits hard, and it's over. And I would imagine it's a very peaceful death because, from what I can tell, you don't even have time to breathe. You don't have time to inhale or exhale. You're stuck in one level or the other. So these things happen very quickly when they happen. They can happen very quickly. They can also happen slowly. We can have minor episodes, such as what probably happened 500 years ago. But that's an area that's very new to me. I don't know much about it, so I don't want to talk much about it. I believe it's called the mud flood. So if you hear anything about that, there's probably some truth to it, and that probably is also suppressed history. Now, to give you an idea of what we need to talk about, I think what you need to know is that when the Earth's magnetic field drops to the levels that it's at today, the North Pole has an excursion and the South Pole moves as well. From what I can tell, they can move as far down as pretty close to the equator. So things can go very topsy-turvy. Does the whole surface of the Earth move? I don't really know. I don't think it's required. I think there are different cycles. When we drive through the mountains of the western United States, particularly Navajo area, we'll see earth layers, if you will. There's layers upon layers of strata. And in some of these strata, there's folds. And it's very, very beautiful. When you're driving through Navajo area in particular, you'll see these giant folds of several layers, and there's some ripples, like a wave, are in these folds. However, on closer look at these folds, you'll see layers of white or light-colored rock that are on top of each other. Each one of those layers is a cataclysm. So this is the time record. The Earth keeps a record of time as to the cataclysm. So each one of those levels in white is a level of limestone, and it's a flood. And you'll see that there's a dark layer approximately every fifth layer of basalt, of dark rock. And that apparently is a much bigger catastrophe. So there are approximately 5 layers of limestone, sandstone, with 1 layer of dark basalt rock in there. And so those episodes are approximately, I'm taking a good guess, that's what I have to go by because science is suppressed by the people that own and run this planet today. Any good science has been thwarted. It's been undermined. They give it the most weird terms possible. They use the most obscure language possible. They play word games on us to confuse us and to keep us ignorant. But my guess is that about every 25,000 years, the limestone deposits, that type of flood occurs. And about every 125,000 years, maybe 150,000 years, we get this other type of cataclysm in which we get the darker rocks. That might indicate more of a volcanic type of activity in the planet. Now, in the Bible, there's what's called the Day of the Lord, and also there's also the prophecies about Christ, about the Messiah, and we believe that from the old parchments, the general consensus was that the Messiah was going to appear once and that was going to be it. Well, we were wrong about that. It's going to appear twice, perhaps even more than twice. What I'd like to call your attention to is that from my reading, the Day of the Lord appears to be about 5 or 6 different days in the Bible. To give you an example, on one day of the Lord, um, it sounds as though there's going to be a meteorite, an asteroid striking the Earth, and the Earth will heat up like a giant oven, and the whole surface will crinkle, will crack from one area to the other, and much like paint drying on the surface of a balloon cracks, that will occur. Another day of the Lord is when Jesus touches down at the Mount of Olives, and it splits in half. There's a giant earthquake. So, we have Yahshua, the Messiah, touching down, and the earth splitting there over in what we call Israel today. In another day of the Lord, it looks as though Yahshua returns with the armies, and it's a very bloody war. It's a very horrible, bloody war. Another day of the Lord, there's a reference to the Bible in that everything on the surface, I'm assuming that means all mammals, will go blind, and that will be because of the radiation that is emitted from the sun at that time. Another description of the day of the Lord, the sun will turn to sackcloth. What does that mean? Well, it would look like I believe it means sunspots, that the sun would be covered in sunspots, so many sunspots that it will look like sackcloth. So it will diminish. There'll be black spots all over it. There'll be sun rays of different colors, red, oranges, coming through the cracks in these sunspots. So this means the sun is going to have a pretty ferocious storm. If we look at the other traditions, we find in South America that the peoples in their stonework are trying to warn us about the sun getting angry, and the sun basically throwing snakes, if you will, that's the depiction in the artwork, down to the earth, lightning bolts to the earth, plasmas discharging from the sun will appear in incredible forms on the earth. How do we know this? We know this because of the old cave art. We know this because of the old runes, the old carvings that the ancient ones made for us and left for us. They were trying to warn us. One of the famous symbols is that of squatting man. A squatting man is a particular array that's been replicated in the labs with plasma experiments. So we know that this is real science. This stuff really happens. By the way, another one of those famous symbols that occurs in the sky in these plasma displays is what we call the menorah. And so that would indicate to me that the menorah is not a Jewish tradition. It is a symbol from the days of the recycling of the earth. And when we go through those periods, you will see the menorah up in the sky, a plasma design that resembles a menorah. And that's where that symbol comes from. So it's not a strictly Jewish symbol. It's actually a symbol of the planet that occurs during these periods, which have happened many times. So we are in that period. And if you look at what's called the precessional clock, spelled with E's, precession, meaning the precession of the seasons, you will see that we're at about the 6:30 time on this giant clock. And that coincides with many calamities before on the surface of the planet. Now, before you get upset, you got to keep in mind that Yahweh created this place. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much the whole universe is like a giant clock, if you will. Everything is set in motion. Everything is set to have its seasons and its periods. So in the Bible, when it refers to God's time, God's days, they are much longer than ours. They line up with that precessional clock. So this is stuff that was set up from the beginning of time, the beginning of creation. And it was set up with such intricacies that on the ancient high holy days of Israel, we have a lot of our lunar eclipses and solar eclipses. At the time of the coronation of King David, there were 6 eclipses sequentially, each on the high holy days of ancient Israel. Those would be the Passover in springtime, and also in the fall you would have the Feast of Tabernacles. Those are the 2 biggest holy days of ancient Israel, and Yahweh said that we would celebrate them forever. And so you and I aren't celebrating those right now. We've lost a lot of our heritage. We've lost a lot of our tradition. It's been taken from us. It's been hidden from us. We're the victims of the largest identity theft, the greatest identity theft in the history of the world, at least in the history of this earth age. How long is an earth age? I don't rightly know, but from reading the Apocrypha in the book of Esdras, I believe it was 2 Esdras, maybe it was 1 Esdras, the earth age is approximately about 10,000 years, 12,000 years from the writing, from the instructions given by that angel to Esdras. I'll go with that. I believe that the Bible is the yardstick by which we measure other things, other truths. There are some errors in the Bible. The Bible has been transcribed by men. Also, it's been transcribed and the enemy has been in there fouling things up for us. So, in my estimation, by about 1850, all the seminaries had been taken over, and they were training people in what I would call a false religion. They made up a man-made religion, and by the 1850s, all of your ministers, pastors that were going through seminaries were stuck in their system. The Bible translators were also taken over to a very large extent. We've had the enemy in there screwing that up for a long time. Some of these great historical periods, like the Council of Nantes, I think it was, Charlemagne the Great, the things that he did weren't so great for us. It's been so long since I've even thought about these things that it's hard for me to remember. But as you and I go about having these morning discussions and other discussions, hopefully my memory will kick in. Back when I was on the radio more than a decade ago, well, last time was 5 years ago. First time was, well, more than a decade ago, probably 12 years ago. I actually surprised myself with what came out of my mouth. I didn't know what I was going to say, and there were things that I remembered that I hadn't thought of since I was a little boy. I need you to understand something. I've been working on these problems since I was about 5, 6 years old. I didn't understand why the world was the way it was, and my parents were pretty fed up with me, especially my mother, because I asked too many questions. Not only that, I had a habit of thinking deeply, and sometimes I would start talking out loud, what was on my mind. And my mother would stop me all the time and says, wait a minute, hold on. And she would try to get me to back up and start my thought from where it had originated when I hadn't spoken it, so that she could understand things. I guess I was a problem child because I kept calling things out that just didn't make sense. I kept pointing out what I thought was the truth, and I kept getting negated. It was not a very good environment for me, in that it was a constantly negating environment, which is actually the most damaging environment possible for a child. I know a lot of you think that a sexual abuse is the most damaging thing, and it's actually in the literature psychology literature. It's actually not regarded as the most damaging, but a negating environment is. And a negating environment is an environment in which the child is told, you don't feel that way, you don't believe that, that's not how you feel, that's not what you think, that's not what you like. So the constant negation is a problem. And when you have adults who think that they know better and they're just children themselves, you get into some real trouble. So when I was about 6, 7 years old, I realized that things weren't quite the way they should be. My dad was an army officer. We got the call to be. My dad was going to be transferred to Germany, stationed in Germany for 3 years. I didn't want to go there because at the time I heard the German people were horrible people. They were vicious, vile, nasty, cruel. I didn't want to go there. I had heard about World War I, World War II. I had heard all of that propaganda. And so at age 7, I went to Germany as a little boy. And I have to tell you, they were better than we were. They were more honest. They were more intelligent, more intellectual, more rational than we were. And I was shocked because they weren't these vile, cruel, evil monsters I was told they were. They were better than us. And so I lived for 3 years in Germany, Butzbach, Bad Nauheim. Well, Bad Nauheim to start off with, then Butzbach, then Heidelberg. I learned quite a bit about the German people as a little boy. I wanted to go to the German school. My mother forbid it. She refused it. I wanted to go to the German school. I think the education would have been better. I would have learned German. In my family, my mother grew up in a Polish, French Canadian household, and they spoke French and Polish. So she knew the language, but they didn't want us children to learn the language because they wanted us to excel at English. They didn't want it was believed at the time that knowing other languages would confuse a child. But what we now know is that a child has a language acquisition device, a LAD, a LAD. Who was that? Was that Kurzweil that came up with that, or somebody before Kurzweil? Anyway, a child can absorb and learn any language fluently before the age of 7. So it would have been wonderful had I learned French and had I learned Polish as a child and then progressed to German. The German people are extremely noble people. They've been attacked viciously, and it's a shame what's happened. However, it's understandable. Not that it's right. It was not right at all. It was understandable because the evil ones were jealous of them, and the evil ones wanted to usurp the throne, take the scepter away. They wanted to rule over us. You see, when Joshua left, it was told early on that Judah would have the scepter. Judah would hold the scepter. They would have the power and the authority. And back when the Roman Catholic Church needed an enforcer, a champion, an emperor, they always selected a German. There were reasons for this. Germany, meaning genuine, are the descendants of Judah. And we had to attack Germany. We had to attack Judah, the descendants of Judah, in order to genocide them as best we could with those wars, so that the guys that want to take over the planet would be able to arrive at the position we are today. Today they own and run the planet. I'm not going to identify them for you, certainly not directly. You can figure out who they are on your own, and if you can't, well, sorry, but as one of the teachers, pastors in this movement that I came out of said, you can't fix stupid. And that was James Wigstrom, Dr. James Wigstrom, who said that. James Wigstrom and I did not get along very well. I couldn't figure out what it was. I think I understand it today. The man had some problems for sure. He had some knowledge, and he also had a peculiar position. However, I have a mutual friend who is a teacher that I need a face-to-face with about Mr. Wigstrom before I can talk further about him. But he pretty much ran me off from his little group there, and I didn't mind that in a certain sense because he was a jackass. He wasn't treating me respectfully, and I vowed never to return after the second visit there. I did pick up some things there. I met some wonderful people there. It was an odd group. It was very eclectic, hard-nosed, very straight ahead. However, I have to tell you that truthfully, the luscious, illustrious FBI has infiltrated every organization in the country possible, and they have their agents everywhere. They've had their agents everywhere for a long time. This is a tradition that came down from the popes. It happened at the time of Descartes. Descartes had been, that's another story for another time. Anyway, what I want you to know is if you're not sleeping, it's because these little particles are going through your body just like they're going through everybody else's bodies on the planet. The planet is at a crucial period. We're at a crucial period politically, and we're also at a period which may potentiate growth. One of my friends who's having some difficulties and hasn't been able to stay in touch with me, and she's been pretty helpful and kind of blown my mind with the things she's pointed out. We're going through a period in which there are extinctions. Yes, species go extinct, and there is also speciation. Now, extinction, I understand. It's very easy to understand. The volcanoes can blow up and take out whatever. The Earth's atmosphere can change. The gravitational field can change. The ability to support large animals can change because there's not enough oxygen in the atmosphere. That has happened before. It's how we lost the dinosaurs, I believe. The Earth's atmosphere was no longer that dense. There's been some massive changes in it. But what I don't understand is speciation. How these new species appear. Does Father Yahweh visit the planet with the other powerful ones? And do they repopulate the Earth? Do they give us new designs? I just don't know. Do they genetically engineer a new type of humanoid? Possibly. You have to keep your mind open to all of these things. Much like the idea of fallen angels being devils and also being aliens, or perhaps beings from another dimension. You have to hold these concepts gently and realize that a perspective is useful, is valid when it has utility. So when a perspective helps you, it has validity. So don't give up your perspective just because somebody tells you that they don't agree with it. They don't agree with you. This camera seems to have me at an odd angle with the framing that's going on. So I'm going to adjust it here a little bit and see if that changes things. Now, I don't think that's helpful at all. I think I'm out of frame. Well, the headset's been giving me grief. Bose doesn't send instructions with it, and it has to be done online. And it also, the written instructions don't address all the complexities of it. I could have a bad headset. That's a possibility as well, that my headset has gone out. It doesn't charge up to a full 20 hours like they claim. It charges up to maybe 16 hours. It's a pretty incredible device. I rather like it. The phone is wonderful. It's probably the best that there is right now. The boys at Costco at the kiosk. I can almost remember his name. They helped me quite a bit. There were several of them that helped me, and they encouraged me to wait until this particular phone came out because of the cameras. I think they were right. It was worth waiting for. I do not like delaying the launching of the channel and my videos. It's just the way it has to be. I've got one comment from a friend who actually knows me. I appreciate that. I do encourage comments. I encourage likes and I encourage shares. I need to spread the word on this. I also forget to mention that I'm selling the latest and best Bible in the English language. Of course, that is the proper name version of the King James Bible. I really recommend that you follow the link at the blog, because each time I take that link myself, I'm surprised at the price. I swear, he keeps dropping the price every time I go back, and I thought I saw a $36 price. I couldn't tell. At one point, it looked like that was going to be the standard print Bible, which is indeed a large print. I don't know if I think that's 11 point. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to find out. But the 14-point Bible is just wonderful to read. I highly recommend you get that. The publisher is very highly motivated to distribute these Bibles. We want to get them out there as fast as we can. It's important because knowledge as to what really happened and what the Bible really says is just starting to blossom forth. As I told you, we know that Eve was seduced. Eve said to Yahweh Father that she was seduced by the serpent, and that's who she blamed. And we know also that Cain was the child of that illicit union, that Cain was a hybrid. The word in the Bible, according to my pastor, was Ish. He was an Ish, and at that point, the word's use indicates that he was a hybrid, that he wasn't an Adam or an Adam. The original word for man in the Bible, at least the type of man that Adam was basically his name. It means several things. One of the meanings that's been attributed to it is that it means to be able to get red in the face. Adam was created from the red clay, the red earth. The body was. This is pretty incredible, folks. One of the incredible things is that we think that we get our genes from our parents. And something I learned, doctor, what is your name? He's the health guy that's been out for a while. Begins with an M. This doctor in particular had a guest on who was an expert in genes. And what he said is that most of our genes do not come from our parents. They come from our biome. They come from the lively mass that is on our skin, in our intestines, these bugs and parasites that we are host to. Most of our genes come from that. Now, if you hold on a minute and think about it, we're earthlings. And we're always going to be earthlings. And the earth is our mother, for certain. So I don't think that earthlings can exist, at least not for long, off the surface of this planet. So we really are attached to Mother Earth. Most of our genes are pulled from Mother Earth and not from our parents. Now that's kind of a wild thing. That's just a mind-blowing aspect. I mean, it blows my mind. What do you think? Does that blow your mind? Yes, we've got genetic differences among us, but we're not allowed to talk about that stuff because it's considered, well, it's not considered the right stuff to talk about because it offends people. But yet we know that inside of each one of us, we've got Neanderthal DNA, Cro-Magnon DNA, Denison DNA, and there were other humanoids also, and we have some DNA from them as well. Now, for you folks who don't like the Bible, You find it antagonizing. You're antagonistic towards the Bible as well. Um, the Bible does appear to be a collection of myths or stories. Actually, I think they're collections of the historical record from before this particular Earth age. Um, and so there's some validity to those old Sumerian stories. It appears as though those are paralleled in our Bible and elsewhere as well, in the Egyptian literature and the Sumerian literature. So when people tell you that a story is exclusive to the Bible, let them go. Don't argue about it. It's not worth arguing about. There's some things, though, we have to agree upon. I believe we have to agree upon the name of Yeshua and that he's the Messiah. We're not ready for that. A lot of us still insist on the name of Jesus being the name that saves everything. I have news for you that the Society of Jesus was formed about the 1500s, 1600s, and its mission was to put forward the name of Jesus. Now, why do you form a society to put forward a name of Jesus, a name that you know really wasn't the right name? That's the same time that the letter J appeared in the English language. It's just about the same time as the Shakespearean plays, just about the same time as the King James Bible. A lot of things happened during the Elizabethan era. Not all of it was good. But we're here today, so we have to be grateful for that. Anyway, be grateful today. Enjoy the food you have, the raiment, the clothing you have. Enjoy the peace that we have today, the relative peace. There's not peace everywhere. However, I want to assure you that there's far more peace in the Ukraine than you think. Do you think? Are you thinking? Why do I ask that? Because we're being played again, folks. William Shakespeare, who didn't write the plays, as I've told you before, but I'll just say William Shakespeare because that's who's going to be recognized, said all the world is but a stage and life is a play. You need to understand, folks, that we're being manipulated and we're being played. And even the most lofty, highest people that you would think are straight ahead, they aren't. It's not what you think it is. And even those people who've been portrayed as extremely evil, especially historically, and some of you know who I'm referring to, he wasn't as evil as what they make him out to be either. He had some issues and some problems. He's a man. I'm a man. You're a man or a woman. We are all human beings. We're all radiant beings. We're all quite fallible, yet we're far more powerful than we realize. We've been suppressed and attacked for years at this point. In case you're wondering, it's not just the fact that we are at the end of an earth age, but it's the fact that the keepers, the managers for this plantation, manage it to our detriment and for their master. So we're all subject to propaganda, poisoning of the mind, and we're all subject to poisoning of our bodies. Okay? The cause of mental illness, and I'll just say that because 2 medical doctors, naturopathic physicians, told me this, is manganese spiking. Folks, these people are so evil, they put heavy metals in our food, primarily our processed food, for the purpose of down-regulating us and for the purpose of actually genociding us, killing us. They do it slowly, but they certainly do it. The Bible says clearly we're supposed to live to be 120 years of age. That's the last reduction of the lifespan of man by Yahweh in the Bible. Well, folks, I don't see anybody making it to 120 years. And I would like my youth back. Yeah, fat chance of that. I'd like to have another 60 years. Yeah, I'm older than that. So the odds are against that, and I understand that. Folks, as you go through the day, be very aware of your blessings. Count the little things. I mean, just dwell on those. Those are going to take your mind off the misery a little bit, and they'll take your focus off the evil. In the Bible, it basically says don't major in evil. Yes, it's there, but we have to study it and we have to learn it just so we can do a little bit of self-defense. Remember, be not deceived. Hold your ground. All right. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.